Here's today's top story. My Nvidia GPU had features I ignored for 2 years, and enabling them changed how every game runs. It's 2026, and Nvidia is still the undisputed industry leader when it comes to the feature suite designed to enhance the gaming experience on the PC. The problem is, most PC gamers never actually venture beyond the graphics settings menu in their favorite titles to get the most out of their GPUs. Doing that today would be a mistake, and that's because most of the performance-enhancing features that matter no longer live inside the game's settings menu at all. Instead, they're tucked away inside the Nvidia app. Regrettably, most people, not unlike myself, only ever reach for it to install the latest driver update and close it immediately after. If you have been guilty of the same, you probably don't know of the many one-click toggles that can bring your games closer to justifying your monitor's 180Hz refresh rate, unlock better visual fidelity from the display panel you already own, and enhance the gaming experience in ways no in-game graphics menu can. Here are the 3 Nvidia app features I wish I'd started using before I played through half my Steam library. Smooth motion is exactly how I wanted frame generation to be driver level, one click, and a visual delight. Smooth motion took an embarrassingly long time for me to discover, but once I did, I enabled it across almost my entire Steam library. After all, who doesn't want extra frames? Besides, at the price you pay for an Nvidia GPU, it might as well give you more throughput on every single game you play. Unlike DLSS frame generation, smooth motion doesn't rely on the goodwill of the developers to implement support. It's a driver-level feature that generates an AI-interpolated frame between 2 rendered frames, allowing games to run without native frame generation to benefit from smoother motion, as the name suggests, rightly so. That makes it particularly useful for those who like to emulate games, older DirectX titles, and games like Elden Ring, which is capped at 60 FPS. It certainly isn't a replacement for DLSS frame generation, but it's an excellent fallback everywhere else. As to why it took so long for me to find and enable it, part of the problem is discoverability. The Nvidia app hides many of its useful features behind menus most wouldn't think to open, while newer features are usually announced through press or driver release notes that almost no one goes through. If it wasn't for a mid-game conversation with fellow XDA author Samravir Singh, I would have likely slept on this feature. DLSS Override is still very confusing to many. Very few get it right, and most don't stumble upon it at all. Most people assume DLSS quality is fixed at whatever the game launched with, and honestly, that was true until a while ago. If a title shipped with an older DLSS build, you were stuck with it until the developers bothered to patch it into a newer version, which, for a lot of games, never really happened. I wouldn't be at all surprised to learn that most players aren't aware of the fact that you can essentially force a newer DLSS transformer model and the preset onto these games yourself. If that isn't the beauty of being on the PC platform, I don't know what is. But I digress. To do this, you'd actually have to go beyond the Nvidia app and use 2 free, community-developed tools. The first is the DLSS Swapper, and the other is the Nvidia Profile Inspector, NVPI. DLSS Swapper replaces the game's outdated .dll file with the newer transformer-based library, and in the process also backs up the original in case you need to revert. Nvidia Profile Inspector, on the other hand, lets you override the driver-level preset for the specific title, forcing the game to use the newer DLSS 4.5 transformer model instead of defaulting back to its original preset behavior. Now, this isn't a one-click toggle, and it takes a bit of poking around directories to get it right. The payoff, however, is certainly a much better experience with the upscaler. Especially if you're stuck using DLSS 2 or 3 implementations with their notorious reputation for ghosting and artifacting. I've also written a comprehensive guide to implement it with games that do not support the new transformer model with success. It's good for anything single player, but anyone who's thinking of using it with a competitive title needs a word of caution, as anti-cheat systems usually don't play nice with DLSS Swapper. RTX HDR is the antidote to Windows' poor HDR implementation. Your games don't have to suffer because the OS can't get HDR right. Windows native HDR handling has a horrid reputation for a reason. If you turn it on system-wide, you'll end up with washed-out colors, crushed blacks, or an image that somehow looks even worse than the SDR version you started with. It's no surprise that many users left the feature off and never looked at it again. RTX HDR is Nvidia's driver-level answer to this problem. Instead of being at the mercy of Windows or the game devs to implement HDR correctly, it analyzes SDR images as they render in real time and remaps the color and contrast to HDR on the fly, even working on titles that never arrived with native HDR support. You'll need both Windows HDR and the Nvidia app for this to work, though. All that needs to be done is switching on HDR from Windows display settings, but leaving Auto HDR itself turned off, as it overrides RTX HDR. From there, you'd have to head into Global Settings on Nvidia App and enable RTX HDR. This is just the tip of the optimization iceberg. The Nvidia App and the broader feature suite around RTX cards has continually gotten better, and if you're still using it just to update drivers, you're very likely missing out on features you'd otherwise love. Since most of these features make their debut rather silently, it's easy to miss a few big game changers every now and then, and so, it's a good idea to pay the old Nvidia app a visit once in a while to see what it can do for you. Nvidia App. The Nvidia App is the primary command center for Nvidia RTX and GTX series GPUs that combines driver updates, graphics settings, and system tuning tools into a single interface. That's it for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.